Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Before we even jump in, just take a minute, tell me about yourself, and then we're going to go from there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I appreciate you having me on today. And I love the title of your podcast, Small Steps, Big Wins, because to me, it is about taking step-by-step intentional action in achieving whatever one's goals are. You know, eat an elephant one bite at a time. Small steps lead to big wins. I think it's a very, very effective way to engage it. High level for me is that, I'm just here to engage with your audience about how they can live their American dream. Contrary to what we hear, the American dream is alive and well. I've been lucky enough to live mine through 16 years of what I'll call entrepreneurial business ownership. And I wrote a book, Grit It Done, available at grititdone.com for 99 cents through the end of May, that provides a roadmap for how to be a low-risk, successful entrepreneurial business owner. So that, Sue, is me in a nutshell.
Great, Reid. Thank you. And I did read your book, and it was, I love it. It was thorough. It was easy to read. It was full of anecdotes. And I'm like, I can't wait to have some more of a conversation around that too. But even before we jump into your book, what's one small step that you did either in your personal life or professional life that you didn't think was going to have a big result for you?
One step that I've taken in my personal life or my professional life that I didn't think was going to have a very significant step for me, but it did, is that when I was in business school in 2015 at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, which is a fantastic school full of some very smart, hardworking, ambitious people, I got the opportunity to be the teaching assistant for a class on entrepreneurship through acquisition, which is essentially how to buy, grow, and run a small business. And it was the first class that Chicago Booth had ever taught on this topic. And I knew I wanted to be the teaching assistant for it because I had an interest in this space, but they'd already chosen a teaching assistant. So I asked them if I could be the TA. They said, no, we're good. Then I asked the other TA if I could be a co-TA, and he agreed. And he allowed me to be a co-TA with him. And teaching that course was completely transformational for me. And it inspired me to do two things. One, it inspired me that I wanted to then go back and become an adjunct professor, teaching people how to do this. Now, at that point in my career, I'd been reasonably successful with my fitness club business, but then it inspired me to go out and do something even bigger so I could come back and I could teach people how to go down that same route as well. And I've now been able to do that, and I do that. I'm an adjunct professor. I teach this to executives and MBAs that want to go out and go down this route. So the small step in that process was being humble and asking to be the co-teaching assistant, even though I'd already gotten rejected for being, I'd been rejected by the professors, but I went and I asked for help, and I was given that help. And that relationship ended up to be a very impactful one in my life with the co-teaching assistant, and certainly with both the professors as well. So the key takeaway is that oftentimes things in life are not done alone. There's no need to take these small steps independently. Relationships and people are what drive results, and of course lead to fulfillment as well.
Oh, I love your story. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, there's definitely being humble, but I also hear grit as well in there because you were, you went back to that professor and like you didn't have to. You could have given up when they told you no, they don't need a teaching assistant. So there's grit in there too. Let's go into your book because it shares a lot of the simple but practical plans for building generational wealth through entrepreneurial business ownership. I'm going to stumble over that for a few. First of all, I love the title. So how did you decide on Grit It Done, and where does that theme of grit come in for you?
I love Angela Duckworth, and I love the principle of grit, which is just a combination of passion and perseverance with a lot of academic research behind it. The way the title came about is that I was working with one of my team members, one of my entrepreneurial employees, I'll call her, Marilyn. Marilyn, it had been a long, terrible day. And one part of Marilyn's job is this really annoying task of having to manage accounts receivable and link it up with field service management software. It sounds really easy. It is insanely difficult. It is like walking through a minefield. It had been a terrible day. She was working hard late into the night to get these things balanced, and we had a really early morning the next day. Marilyn showed tenacity. She showed grit. She showed the ability to just power forward, and eventually, late at night, she got it done. And I was helping her a bit with it. And I said, Marilyn, you are fantastic. You really have a grit it done attitude. And then, that's the first time I'd ever said all those terms together. Then to the point of the power of peer groups, that happened on a Thursday. The Tuesday, so a couple of days later, I was at a forum of entrepreneurs organization, EO, and I was telling that story. And someone else in the group that had trademarked a few things over their career said, grit it done. That sounds kind of cool. And that really sounds like you, Reid. I'm going to go see if that's trademarked. He looked it up and it wasn't. He said, you should totally trademark that. And I said, that's a really good idea. I'll do that. And that's where the book title comes from. And the key takeaway to that point, which I wanted to underscore with a point about the teaching assistant as well, all about the relationships, right? The relationships that I've cultivated with the peer groups over the years, and also the relationships that I've cultivated with the key team members, though what I'll call the entrepreneurial employees like Marilyn over the years. That is what the most fulfilling part of this process is. The autonomy, the freedom, the calendar control. If you follow the steps in the book, you're going to have a higher probability of making good generational wealth out of it. Ultimately, it's the people and the vision of good government that I believe make this path so lucrative for society as a whole. I like to say that to be a better American is to be an entrepreneurial business owner, and for so many interesting reasons.
Okay, so what are some of those interesting reasons, and tie it in with the traits and characteristics that somebody would need to have to be an entrepreneur?
I think the first step in the process is assessment. There's 4 critical avatars. One is employees. Employees are great. I mean, they are the backbone of companies. They are the backbone of the economy. The good ones get promoted, and the bad ones, usually find the door in some capacity. Then you'll have what I'll call equity employees. An equity employee is like a CEO. They have equity in the business. They're able to work on the business and not in the business, creating shareholder value, creating equity value. Ultimately, as an equity employee, do not control your destiny. You can get fired by a board, get fired by a boss. You're not completely in control. Then you have a business owner. I love business owners. I've been a business owner for a long time in my career. Ultimately, though, as a business owner, while you own the upside of what you do and you have a certain level of autonomy, the business oftentimes owns you more than you own the business. Then there's the entrepreneurial business owner, and that is where you're able to work on the business and not in the business and achieve that level of autonomy and of freedom that I believe a lot of Americans desire, and what to me is ultimately the American dream. But the first step in the process, though, is to realize, okay, do I actually want to go down the route of being a business owner or an entrepreneurial business owner? Because it's a ton of work. The cost of failure, and failure does happen, can be high, because if you follow the steps that I would recommend using SBA 7A financing to acquire a business, which comes with a unconditional personal guarantee. Now, the book has 9 chapters, but if you go wrong with an SBA 7A loan, it puts you in chapter 11, which is a place that none of us want to be. But it's critical to understand, is this really the right path for you? Because what I see happen a lot in the space is people thinking they want to do this and then investing time and money and resources going down the path, and then realizing, what? Maybe I am only an employee, or maybe I am really just an equity employee. I don't really want to go down the route of this. So early on in the book, I have an assessment tool, which is very simple, that allows you to ask some of those basic questions about which of those 4 avatars you fit, and if it makes sense to go down this route. And the reason I wrote the book is it is, in my judgment, the most time efficient and cost effective way to analyze if it makes sense to go down the route of being an entrepreneurial business owner.
So, from your book, what are a few of the questions that one would ask themselves? If they're saying, "Oh, I want to go buy a business," it's like, "Oh, it's easy." But if somebody's listening to that and they're going, "Yeah, I hate my W-2 job, and now I want to go buy a laundromat," what would be your first line of questioning to them? And what should they be asking themselves? And then a follow up to that is, what's the dark side of business acquisition that nobody's talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the critical part to it is the first thing I would tell people after they've read the book, right? And then you can go online, book a call with me. I do a lot of these calls with individuals consistently. And I just find that people don't always know what the right questions to ask are, to your point. So I'm so grateful for you to answer that. But the key is, talk to people that are business owners, talk to the ones that are happy, talk to the ones that are really unhappy, that have regrets doing it, and talk to everybody in between. And if you do that, you're going to get a good wide spectrum of experience shares that are going to inform you as to if this path makes sense. And if you decide it does make sense, then you're going to have a whole roadmap to avoid some of the landmines, to avoid some of the same issues that those owners had in their experience. So the critical part is, talk to people that are business owners. Be prepared when you do it, though. And a big reason that I wrote the book is so that when people talk to me, they know what the right questions to ask are, as opposed to just, "Hey, tell me about this," or "Tell me about your background." They can say, "Hey, in the book you talked about this key employee challenge that you had. Like, how did you really navigate that? Like, walk me through your emotions with it." Because to your point, I think there's a lot out there about why this is sexy, why this is like the American dream, why everyone should do it. And a lot of the stuff out there doesn't have those good, gory details about what it's like to actually do it. And one thing that I love so much in the book, which you would see, is that one of the individuals that wrote an endorsement for it, it's like warmed my heart when he did it. But he actually wrote that. He said that in the world of entrepreneurship through acquisition, this book actually mixes the frameworks with anecdotes, right, to illustrate what this world is really like. Now, I think it's critical that there's no substitute for experience in the space. So, for example, for the MBA programs that I work in, and listen, there's a lot of various routes to analyze going through this. You can take a weekend workshop. Those are fantastic. You can listen to all the podcasts. They're fantastic. You can go get an MBA, right? That's a great route as well. There's all kinds out there. One is not right, one is not wrong. I think ultimately, though, there is no substitute for getting experience on the ground, in the trenches, in a small business. If you have the pleasure of being raised in a family that had a small business, you're naturally going to get that, right?
Right.
One thing that's
Well,
great. Yep.
oh, I was gonna say, well, if somebody listening, like, I don't come from an entrepreneurial family and I don't have an MBA, but there's this drive. This business stuff seems appealing to me because, like, I want to go do something different, right? So, what would you say to help them not to get discouraged? I think that's what I'm trying to get at, not to get discouraged, because I could see some saying, "Oh, well, I don't have any of that stuff, so I'm just going to give up at this point." Like, what would you say?
Well, I would say that if you're thinking, "Hey, I don't have any of this stuff, I want to get up at this point," the critical part of this is, I think that people believe that in order to be successful, like, I think a misconception people have is that you join a peer group of business owners or something like that when you've already been successful, that joining a peer group is a sign of success. Complete opposite. You join a peer group to become successful, because if you have doubts about, is this the right step for me to take, should I be doing this, then simply surround yourself with people that also want to go down this route, and surround yourself with people that have gone down this route. And then in doing that, whether or not you actually want to, you will become more like them, and you will morph into being a business owner. And eventually you'll morph into being an entrepreneurial business owner. So, critical part of change, unequivocal in the peer reviewed literature. And just, I think we all know it intuitively. That's my judgment. You become like the people that you surround yourself
Right.
with. So the critical step is to find what that right group is. And there's a lot of options out there for it. Again, there's MBAs, there's weekend workshops, there's mastermind groups, right? There's online communities. You can create one on your own. There's a ton, but key takeaway to mitigate that and to be able to take those uncomfortable, awkward, painful steps, find the right peer group.
Yeah.
And there's not a
Okay.
right one, there's not a wrong one, but diligence them, be thorough, talk to a variety. And when you find out one that just feels kind of gut level right, that's a situation, that's where you've really found fit. So when it
Yeah.
comes to dealing with the self-doubt, there's no substitute for being in a peer group and a community that helps overcome that trepidation and those fears.
What I love about your answer is that it circles back around to relationships and people that you know, and like forming those relationships in order to help you go down the path that you think you want to go down. What are some other benefits that you've experienced from the relationships that you formed and building your businesses?
I mean, the relationships that's just where it's at. It's a sense of, it's a sense of like fulfillment in my heart that is hard to describe for words, except to say that it is what life is all about at the end of the day. I owned an industrial services business, and it was very dirty work. The kind of work that actually excites me. Keeps the country running, grease trap pumping, kitchen exhaust, Vector trucks, all that good stuff, right? And one thing I loved about the business is that it's very technician centered business. And a lot of the technicians, I knew that if I got in the business and really got my hands dirty with it, that the real opportunity of it, which is in a sense to me working on the business in a way for me to leave it better than I found it, is just to invest myself personally in like the technicians' lives and figure out ways to help, in whatever way that I could, whatever way they were looking for, like push their lives forward in some capacity, whether it's with getting a driver's license or a commercial driver's license or more certifications so they could make more money in the business, all that good stuff. I looked at that as what the goal of the business was for me, what the real opportunity was. And the reason I was able to do that is that earlier in my career, when I was a multi-unit Anytime Fitness Club owner, I met an individual who was in his late 70s at the time. I was in my mid 20s. So there was literally a 50-year life age difference. And he owned a variety of fast casual restaurants in California, been a small business owner forever. Fantastic individual. And he told me, he said, Reid, listen, when this is all over, you're not really going to care about, how many fitness clubs you open. You're not really going to care about how much money you made. He said, what you are really going to care about is the positive impact that you have on the people around you. And where I've been able to find that is with the team members that I've helped and mentored along the way. And it was like fortuitous timing for me to hear that because I'd owned businesses for a couple years. So I knew that was true because I tasted a little bit of that. And I took that advice and I just applied that mercilessly going forward. And I can tell you that independent of the financial windfalls, independent of any of the nice accolades on the resume, independent of anything else, it is those relationships and those feelings in the heart that I get knowing of the couple times I've really been able to have a positive impact on the team members. Now, let's be clear. Team members are the biggest source of pleasure. They're also the biggest source of pain as well. It goes both
There's that
ways.
dark side.
Big time dark side. But one thing
Yeah.
that I really appreciate about the peer groups that I've been a part of is as I've gone through these projects and I've really felt the downside of some of those things and some of the just the heartbreak around it and the getting kicked, where, I always found that the peer groups were really effective at reminding me of like, you know what? I know that what you just went through was terrible, but what you are doing is good. It's the
Right.
right thing and keep on going. Right.
Yeah, having a bigger vision, doesn't that set you keep going forward? When you get those setbacks like that, it's just having the real reason why behind what you're doing is what drives you. That's what I hear you saying is that it's all about the relationships, and it's about the people. But when you have your bigger vision, your why, then that those day to day, those things that do knock you down, they do, but then you just keep getting back up again.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and you ha and you ha and
That's
you
that grit there.
yeah,
We
yeah.
love grit. I mean, I think it's awesome. You know what? The one thing that I love about this conversation, I love about your book that I have not really heard, and I think I've spent probably the last year studying businesses and, just fascinated with entrepreneurship. The one theme that I had not seen really is the relationship aspect of buying a business. And a lot of times, what I've been coming across is just like, oh, well, you're going to build your wealth. You're going to build your wealth, and you will. You can. There's no guarantee you can't. But when I start engaging successful small business owners, and I talk to him a little bit more, it's like, it's about the people. It's about the people. It's about providing jobs for 44 people. It's about these people that I'm employing and the lives that I'm enriching. So I just love that about what we're talking about. It's that other side of business entrepreneurship that you don't hear that. How can they be sure that they're going to pick something and build something that's going to align with their values and aspirations? What can somebody do?
Yeah, great question. So the key is you have to understand what your values and what your aspirations are first and foremost. Assessment in this process is critical. There's a great academic study came out in 2017. It reaffirms what I think a lot of us already know. Assume there's two states: assessment when you're thinking about something and locomotion when you're taking steps to achieve it. Which state do you think people feel more, we'll call it satisfaction in, thinking or acting?
Oh, thinking.
Yep.
Definitely thinking, well, you have the analysis paralysis, right? That's the common one where you're just going to analyze out the wazoo and not really do anything. So yeah, no, I think a lot of
Now
people
that
would just stay there.
Yeah, and the crazy part is that, and this is like the so what of the study, is that people feel more satisfaction when they're taking steps towards a goal that they are working towards, and they feel less satisfaction while they're thinking. So the critical part is that the assessment is not fun. The assessment part of the process is not fun. You'll feel less satisfaction there. You'll feel more satisfaction when you're actually going. But do the hard assessment. Think about what your values actually are, because when you look at locomotion, what actually shows higher levels of happiness in the locomotion state is how aligned it is to your intrinsic purpose. So when I coach and I advise people on what's the first step, do the hard work and think about what you actually want to get out of small business ownership, out of being an entrepreneurial business owner. Then when you're armed with that, take those steps towards achieving it, and know that as you're taking those steps, happiness and elation awaits for you in that journey, in the process.
So what would some of the reasons that you've heard or that you've come across why people would start taking, like, when they assess themselves, what are some of the common outcomes that you see? So somebody could have an idea. It's like, oh, okay, this is what I'm looking for, even if that might not exactly fit them.
I think the most common thing that people aspire to is a sense of autonomy and a sense of self determination and the sense of being able to have an impact. And the critical thing about entrepreneurial business ownership, and why it's so powerful, and why I get so fired up about it, is that whatever your values are, you can achieve, you can get that efficacy through being a small business owner. For example, if one value that you have is that you just believe in accountability, right? You believe that people need to show up on time. You can build a culture in your business where showing up on time is rewarded and not showing up on time is not tolerated. And you can have like a positive impact on whatever your values are through the world. Okay. If you believe that as a business owner, it's not about, Milton Fried, coming from a University of Chicago graduate, it's not about Milton Friedman profit maximization. It is about instead, making it so that an owner only makes no more than 4 times what their team members do. Then as a business owner, you can do that. You have the full ability to leave an impact on the world and leave an impact on the country and leave an impact on the individuals around you. So whatever those values are, they can be achieved through small business ownership. And that is what the true power of it is. I can tell you that my utility points, which I've talked about, come from just getting in there and just inspiring, pushing, hand holding, whatever I got to do to like make sure everyone on my team is moving their lives forward. That's what fires me up at the end of the day, right? That's what gets me going. And that it doesn't have to be that way for you. It could be anything that you want to. But as a small business owner, you have that autonomy, right? And that's what autonomy actually means when you're in the trenches, doing it. And be thankful that we live in America, because the Small Business Administration, which, I mean, thank yourself, it's taxpayer subsidized loans, right? At their core, thank yourself, thank your neighbor. Use government subsidies that encourage individuals to go out there and buy existing businesses, or if not buying an existing business, to go out there and buy and start a franchise, right? Which I think, by the way, is and I've been a multi-unit, successful, top-performing franchisee. Going back to something you asked earlier, I think that going into franchising is fantastic, especially if people don't have experience working in a small business or didn't come from a family of small business. Like, franchising is the best, because you learn how to be a business owner, and you can do really well with it, over the years if you invest the time and follow the process. But it also teaches you, and you can think of the cost of franchise fees and royalties and all that good stuff as like the cost of what of learning to become a business owner.
Oh,
But
yeah.
with franchising under your belt, I mean, again, you can just open more franchises and do exceptionally well in that space. But it also actually, I think, gives people a skill set to go out and acquire a business, or also to go out and start a business as well. So I
Well,
think
that
one
would
great low
be
risk step is franchising.
yeah, I was just going to say, for those who don't have that business background or that MBA, then a franchise would be a viable option for them if they're getting bit by this entrepreneurial bug and they want to go down that path. So that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it really does. What would be some small steps if somebody's listening and they're like, "Okay, I now have money paralysis." Let's go there for a minute, because that always seems to be a sticking point for a lot of people. They're like, I don't have any money to buy a business." Do you get that? Is that common question? Like, yeah, I want to do that, but I don't know how to afford that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's two kinds of people in life. There's those that grit it done and those that don't. And if you can either find excuses to do, you can find reasons to do things, or find reasons not to do things ultimately.
Nah, I like the word excuses.
Yeah, and it's
Because
you
it's
know,
true.
it's as simple as that. I think that if you're not all in, you're in the way, right? And you
Mm.
need to get to the point where there's no problems in life, there's only solutions. Okay, that's where the mindset needs to be. And if you're not there, and this is not the right path for you, and you don't feel that in your gut, like you're willing to go all into this, and I would tell you, do yourself a favor, do your loved ones a favor, do me a favor, and don't invest the steps and the time in going down this path. Refocus yourself on your job, refocus yourself on your family, refocus yourself on the area of your life that really gets you fired up and gets you intrinsically excited. What I really don't want to see people do is start to take steps down this path and then decide after 6 months, a year, 18 months that this wasn't the right path for them. And they spent money on, a coach, a weekend workshop, even an MBA, whatever route they go, only to decide, no, this wasn't actually the right path for me at this point. So I think it's fine to feel that sense of trepidation. It's fine to, question, oh, how do I get the money, or should I like take this risk? And it's fine to go through that state of assessment. But my guidance is get through it quickly. I mean, get through it thoroughly, get through it quickly, and be very cognizant of how you're spending your time in that process, because time is life's ultimate commodity. I think that if you read the book, Grit It Done, grititdone.com, it'll provide you high level with enough information, because it's the frameworks mixed with the fun, cool, and scary anecdotal stories of what it's like to be a business owner. It'll give you a sense of if you're willing to take that next step. And then what that next step is, it could be a phone call with someone, with me, or with someone like me. It could be a weekend workshop where you kind of go through and sit for, 8 hours, 3 hours a day of like, hey, here's how you really source for a business. Here is how you really raise money for a business. Here's how others
Mm,
are thinking about financing. Here's how the SBA really works. Here's some other great resources to go. Then that's step two, right? So keep on going through that process. Again, small steps, big wins, as you
yeah.
say. It's a right way to do it.
You mentioned it before, like, go talk to small business owners. It just all comes back to that relationship wise, but
Yeah,
I like the
yeah.
fact that you, like, put a nice little bow on it and said, "Don't take too long to do that." Like, do your homework, but don't take too long, and I think do you think that that keeps people from getting into that analysis paralysis mode?
I do, and I think it's critical to have discipline around most every process that one goes through in life, because I I associate with the people, and that that have looked at doing this for years, right? And I will never think I can predict the future in any capacity whatsoever. I see a certain avatar out there that consistently thinks about it, that kind of delves in, 1 foot out, and they just do it for years and years and years on end. And what frustrates me about it is that I think about what else if they just found that thing that they were into, what else they could accomplish in life. Like, they could be doing so much more with their life than just tire kicking and delving around in this space. And what I just want for them is to find that thing that they're all in for, right? Maybe it's that you're all in, you want to go do a 100-mile, 24-hour endurance race, right? Like, go off and do that if that's what fires you up. And entrepreneurial business ownership, it can be instrumental to make money and do those things. Let's be crystal clear. But if you can't get yourself past that point, after a reasonable amount of time, then, find that next thing that you can. But ultimately, one of my passion projects now is I'm a PhD student, right? Year and a half away from finishing my dissertation. And what it's about is intentional change theory. And the advisor that I work with, very famous guy, will very easily point out that what is the one consistent factor when it comes to personal change, it is relationships. That is there at every point in the process, resonant relationships. So for people out there that are listening, that are having that, oh, I think I want to do this, but yeah, I don't want to be that tire kicker, but yeah, I'm also scared, and yeah, I'm also anxious, and all this good stuff, right? Which is normal. It's fine. Clear guidance is step one. Like, read the book, because that just gives you a nice data download of literally everything that I know and I think is relevant. And then after that, think through what group you want to join and who you want to surround yourself in this process, and then go out and do that, right? And don't just join one, join two. I'm a member of a bunch of them. And I do a lot of mentoring and coaching for them. And it's so powerful. And if you find, I say if, when you find the right one, it can have, I won't say will, it can have positive, profound impacts. Great word, profound, that you don't even think are possible. And I've experienced it. I've seen others experience it. It can be truly life changing. So find that right peer group, find that right relationship, and that's how you can really make this. That's how you can take each of those small steps individually. And then, hey, after that, you might find those small steps take you to the top of the world's tallest staircase in Switzerland, which is a whole conversation for a different day.
You mentioned before you were talking about your working on your PhD, and you mentioned the phrase intentional change theory. I never heard of that before. Do you want to unpack that a little bit? What that is, what it means?
The key principle is that when it comes to making change, whatever that change is for you, and there's a variety of steps in the process, an ultimate driver of it is the resonant relationship that you develop along the way. And in the context, it could be with a coach, right? It could be with a romantic partner. It could be with a key team member. It could be with someone in your peer group. It's those relationships that really drive that behavioral change. And you're not talking about this from a hypothetical or a theoretical standpoint. We're actually talking about it with hard data, right? Academic, peer reviewed data. So when it comes to personal change, the relationships are what can ultimately drive it. And I've shared some of my experiences around, the teaching assistant, right? how those relationships inspired me to, go out and become an entrepreneurial business owner and to eventually become an adjunct professor. And I think that, you know, you can read about it, but I think if you deep down think about, ask yourself, hey, close your eyes and visualize who's someone that has helped me at some point in my life, and ask yourself that question, let it sink in. And then step two is, think about, well, how did they help me? What came out of that? And I think, I don't want to anchor you to how you're going to think about it, but go through that exercise. And I think that'll shed some light on the role that relationships and people have played in your life as you've looked to, go through various, lifestyle changes.
Oh, that's some great advice because if somebody's not in the entrepreneurial business space, they can still apply that. You know what? Going back on this whole theme of relationships, it kind of shatters the idea of solopreneurship, doesn't it? Like, what are your thoughts when you hear the word solopreneur?
I think when I hear the word solopreneur, I get excited about it, because if that solopreneur is effective, I think that solopreneur, I think about it in two ways. Either they found a good peer group that's allowed them to be empowered, even though they're a solopreneur. And if they've been successful with it without having a peer group, that's even better, because now when they're able to find that right peer group, it's going to open up additional productivity and additional possibilities to them. It's almost like, I love the movie The Shawshank Redemption. And when I meet people that haven't watched it, I get so fired up. So I'm like, wow, your life is going to get better after you watch this. This is great. I wish I could go back and not know and watch it, because yes, this is awesome. Best is yet to come. Yeah. Yeah. So definitely, I highly recommend. I think it's a fantastic movie for a variety of reasons. Highly recommend it, and I think that, you go through that, your life's gonna get better. In the same way that if you have business owners that, and there are still business owners out there, it just absolutely amazes me. And I've been in this position before, that don't engage peer groups, right? They don't engage it. They have lonely owner syndrome. When they do, I've watched like their existences get so much better as well, both on a business performance standpoint, but just on like a life quality standpoint. Because as a business owner, there's really only issues that you can talk to other business owners about. Your friends don't get it. Your team members don't get it. Your significant other, probably won't get it either. But other small business, and if they do get it, it would take me 20 hours to explain it to them. There's other things that small business owners, I get it.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. Like,
Yeah.
I understand.
Do you find that the business owners that try to go the solo route, they don't join a peer group, they don't really talk to anybody, they're just going to grit it out by themselves? Do you find that they have a higher percentage of failure versus other business owners that would seek out others? Is there a correlation? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually know an individual doing some research on that exact issue right now, which I think is really cool. And I look forward to seeing what if he's able to find some like interesting relationship stuff on that, or some interesting data driven findings on that. So I can't point to a study that actually shows that that's the case or not. What I can tell you though is that from my own personal experience and my own experience in the space, the individuals that are part of those peer groups, right, or that have that very strong structured network, I think are the ones that are performing better, both financially and just getting more fulfillment as to what they actually want to get out of their business. And I think it's critical too in helping them avoid what we'll call burnout in their business as well. So having that peer group, all upside. And peer groups, they cost money, to be clear, but the value of them to me is
Right. If you
absolutely
find the right one.
immeasurable. Yeah.
Or what are some steps some people can do to avoid that burnout?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, let's be clear, like being a business owner, I mean, it's a grind.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard work. I mean, and I gave a very positive light on some of the relationship and people issues, because they're so fulfilling when when you get it, right? And
Right.
I've been lucky to get it a variety of times. I've also been on the other side where I've felt that deep emptiness and that deep drain and that deep pain around it as well.
And
But
so what
let's
did
be
you do? What did you do when you encountered that then?
most valuable thing I personally get out of peer groups is that it's really easy to give the advice of, hey, you got to get that person out of the organization, right? And I give that advice all the time. It's much harder to do it when it's me in the hot seat and it's me actually struggling through that. But ultimately, it is just doing the hard thing and realizing when somebody is not the right fit to cut ties in the most time efficient way possible. It's
Mm,
not always possible to do it like immediately, but generally, the sooner it's done, the better. And it is like removing a disease. It is like
mm,
removing a cancer. It is the most one of the most fulfilling experiences. Just it feels good for everybody involved to end a relationship that's not working. And also, it's better for the team member in question as well,
right.
because they're going to go out, they're going to find something that's a better fit for them. Their life's going to get better. Your life's going to get better. The company's going to be in a better situation. It's about having the discipline to remove the wrong people.
Mm,
Now, with that said, it's easy to talk about doing it. It is much more
oh,
difficult to actually do it. I
absolutely.
I believe that, I can tell myself whatever stories I want to, but peer groups are very effective at doing that vulnerability work and
Mm,
pushing individuals, pushing
right.
me pushing others to do the hard thing that we do not want to do. And
Right,
there's a lot of
right.
upside when we're able to achieve it. So burnout, to answer your question, is real, right? And running a small business for a whole lot of reasons is very draining. And ultimately, there's a time to exit the business, right? If you've been doing it for a while or whatever, there's a time to do it. But the research that I most recently did is I looked at sellers of financially successful businesses, and we're going to call minimum EBITDA. So basically, think about it as just cash flow from the business to the owner. Minimum EBITDA of 500,000. More likely, though, it was in the multi millions. So we're talking about the 1% here. I mean, that's what the business was doing profits. So the exit is a very big multiple upon that. So we're talking about mostly like 1%ers here. We're talking about people that financially good to go. And I analyzed what in the group who was satisfied with their sale versus who wasn't satisfied with their sale. And essentially, we're taking money out of the equation because money for this group is not an issue, right? Money is not an issue. And analyzed 32 transactions across 30 individual sellers. And the themes that came out of the satisfied sellers is taking vision based action, which aligns to their ideal self. So basically, the story is, you think about what it is you want to accomplish with a business sale and what you want to accomplish afterwards. Then you have a pretty clear vision. Then the second theme of satisfied sellers is surrounded yourself with competent help. So typically an intermediary that again helped you stay disciplined to what your vision was. And then third, one of the other themes, there's 7 of them, but I'll talk about the 3 that I like the most, is avoid being blinded by the price. A lot of sellers in the not satisfied camp, a story was, maybe they thought the business was worth this and the valuations came back at whatever number, but then someone offered them significantly more than that. Whoa, they think my business is worth this much? No way it is. But there's actually a blinding effect of that. A lot of those deals ended up getting done. And then with hindsight, the sellers in that camp tended to have lower satisfaction rates. And I think the intuitive story there is that, well, not the intuitive story, I mean, interview transcripts. So I read them and coded them all. So I know all the intimate details of it. Is that ultimately that blinding effect prevented the sellers from thinking about the other issues that turned out to maybe be more important, such as maintenance of culture, relationship with the seller or with the buyer, right? Things like that. Whereas the real top performers, those that that really got the highest levels of satisfaction, very thoughtful about what they wanted to get out of the business sale, pretty in touch with themselves, and because of a common what you'll hear in the space a lot, and which I personally believe, by the way, is like my utility point, is that I sell a business, I want out as quickly as possible because I don't want to be in a situation where I am owner but not really owner, and I don't have that hard authority anymore. And I think it's better for me. I think it's better for the team. I think it's better for the business. That's just my bias, and that's what I do. But ultimately, like the top performing sellers from a satisfaction standpoint, they actually stayed involved in the business in a capacity that they were very thoughtful about post sale. And it doesn't have to be a role that involves money or any actual responsibility. It could just be that, you know what, I want to go back and I want to go get lunch with the seller or the buyer, excuse me, every month. Or I want to go and I want to be able to walk into the business every couple of weeks and just say hi to my old team members. And as a new buyer, my first gut be like, no, I want that. I don't want that individual anywhere near the business, right? But these really highly satisfied, sellers were really intentional about what role they wanted to play, and some were more formal. It's like, hey, I want to have a chairman role, or I want to retain some equity, or I want to do this and that. But others, it wasn't that case. So I think a key takeaway with it is to achieve satisfaction from a seller standpoint. If you have that burnout, and if you're thinking this might be the next step, then take the time to also do that assessment as to why. And there's no step for this in the book, right? This book is for buyers, but as a seller, think through what the assessment is, what those next steps look for you in life. And the guidance is take vision-based action towards that. Surround yourself with competent help in the process, and avoid being blinded by the price. And being blinded by the price is not unique to a certain buyer avatar. It's not
Yeah.
unique to a private equity firm or a strategic, or, even I'll say someone like me that might come out and be like, hey, I'm going to just pay you the highest amount for this business, right? Even though you kind of
Uh,
wonder how I could pay more than like a private equity firm. It actually
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
apply to like an individual buyer avatar. But yeah, so some of the things on
yeah.
that. So thank you for
Oh.
listening to my talk about that research.
No, no, that's all right. That's fine. I find the research fascinating. Can you share a bit about your personal journey that led you to embrace the philosophy of own things, don't run things, and then it prioritizes this entrepreneurial business ownership? I love the phrase own things, don't run things.
I had the pleasure of being a superhero. On my first fitness club, I went into it with two equity partners. We each had a third equity. I quit my job in San Francisco. They stayed at their jobs, and that was the agreement. That was fine. The first club, though, mainly because we chose not to follow some of the steps that the franchise laid out. That was the majority of it. I didn't know how to run a business. That was part of it. And we opened it during the Great Recession in the California Central Valley. That didn't help. I dressed up as a purple superhero, pounded the pavement, went door to door, got the club to make a little bit of money, mainly by selling short-term summertime memberships to automatic renewal. And that's where I came to realize, you know what? If I'm going to be the one who's out in the Sacramento heat in the purple superhero suit, I want to be doing this as being the one that owns at least the majority of the upside, and that controls my destiny, and is not just running this for somebody else. And what I ultimately realized in that is that when I get to that point, that is where I'm able to go all in. That is where I'm able to live congruently. And that is where I'm able to live this life that has so much elation to it. Because the truth is, whether I win, whether I lose, whether I make money, whether I don't make money, it doesn't matter. When I'm all into something, I completely enjoy the journey. And at the end of the day, that is what it is, to me at least, what it is all about. So as we're taking those small steps for those big wins, it's nice to have like the world's tallest staircase at the end of it. It's nice to have, be a multimillionaire at the end of it, whatever the goals are, but really enjoying that journey. And the academic studies prove it. Where do we feel happiness? In that state of locomotion, as moderated by how aligned it is to our purpose. How do we have to get that? We got to go through that pain, right, to an extent of the assessment phase, and just think through, is this something that I actually want to do? Then when you get there, just jump into it, go all in, grit it done, and have fun in the process. So that's my quick philosophy on the front end. Do the assessment you have to, and then good things wait from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, find those qualities that are gonna push you forward. You know, you mentioned before that there was an avatar that they do the analysis and they don't move from the analysis stage into locomotion. What character qualities do you see that are common in somebody that I would say stay put versus somebody who starts goes into motion for business?
I think I'll punt back to Angela Duckworth and her original book Grit. What drives grit? And I will tell you what my definition of grit is. My definition of grit is doing exactly what I don't want to do precisely at the time that I don't want to do it in the pursuit of a greater good. That's not Angela Duckworth's definition, but that's how I personally internalize it. But going back to her academic research on it, passion and perseverance are the two factors that drive grit. Passion and perseverance. So understand what it is that really can intrinsically fire you up. And if you can tap into that, and that work can involve going to, for certain people, right? Certainly for me, can involve going to those deep, dark childhood places that maybe it's uncomfortable for us to go into. But if you can dig down and find that reservoir of energy, that reservoir of energy is what's going to be able to drive that passion and that perseverance. That passion and perseverance is going to drive your grit, and that grit is going to drive your ability to do exactly what you don't want to do, precisely when you don't want to do it, as you pursue your endeavor. And in this case, as you pursue your entrepreneurial business ownership endeavor. So the guidance on assessment is really, you got to go to that deep place. You got to find what that is. And then if you do and you tap into it, oh, the sky's the limit. And that process is unique for everybody. And I think it's critical to find the right people and the right person to help you kind of go through that work. I think it's a very worthy investment of time to do, quite frankly, time and maybe potentially a little bit of money to do. Because if you can tap into that and you can find that, the sky is absolutely the limit. And then with
What's your
that,
Oh, go
mhm.
ahead.
No, go ahead, go
I was
ahead, go
gonna say,
ahead.
what's your deep energy that drives you?
I'll give one example of one sense of deep energy that drives me is when I was very young, I got an IQ test. I believe the score came back at 84. Pretty sure it was 84, which is the year I was born, ironically, 40 years old. And I just remember that, and remember the conversations of, well, I think the threshold for like going into special classes was maybe, I think it was below 80, so I was like close to that. I think they actually gave me the option of like, if or gave my parents the option, hey, if you want to go to special classes, you definitely can. Well, I just remember that 84, right? And I use that as inspiration to go out and get a PhD, right? It's like, cool. The individual that had like an IQ score that was 84, hey, I'm gonna go out and
Just a
get a
number.
PhD. Yeah, so I can
Well,
be
there's
like,
inspiration right there. That should
yeah.
inspire anybody right there who's been told or, came to believe well, you're not smart enough to go do, to hear something like that. So I don't know if that's what you were told or that was a drive behind it, but I could see somebody hearing that and go, oh, I've been told all my life I'm not smart enough to do X. But it's really not about the number. It's about the grit and determination and perseverance and energy underneath that's going to drive you.
Yeah,
It
exactly. And then
sounds
what?
like.
And then what's step two of that? Right. Step two is like, cool. So for that, exactly what you just said, right? For that individual that was told that, hey, you know what? You're not like there. You're never like the kind of person that should go out and like buy an existing business. You're not like qualified to do that. It's like, all right, cool. Now let's take it that the individual who had an 84 IQ, was told that, hey, it might make sense for you to go into special ed classes. But what's the response that we took instead? Yeah, never mind that. I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a PhD instead, right? So it's the idea of like, so for me, one thing that drives me is that, hey, if someone tells you you can't do something, great. That's their deal, right? Go out and just do it. You know what I mean? And I think that that's just such a positive message. Go out and get it done. But to get there, I think it's really healthy to go deep in yourself, find those things that can drive you, and then surround yourself with other people that are
Right.
mission driven, have those same goals, and you can find that inspiration
Yeah,
there.
it really sounds like it's all about a high level of self-awareness, coupled with the relationships that you form.
And it depends what you're solving for, right? But we'll say that
Yeah.
in this case, we're going for fulfillment, right? The
Mhm.
factors that drive fulfillment, it's not one factor that drives fulfillment, right? It's going to be like two, three, maybe four, and I think you've hit on what some of those critical ones are.
Yeah, yeah. What's one thing that you thought would be hard about building businesses in maybe in your earlier years? I don't know, maybe now, but really wasn't. And then flip it. What's one thing that you thought would be easy that turned out being really hard?
Mm. That's a great question. One thing which I thought that would be easy, which turns out to be really hard, is that if I try to do everything on my own without enlisting the help of other people, and I'm not talking about team members and the idea of delegation, I'm more talking about lonely owner syndrome, that it's harder to be a business owner when you're lonely than it is to be a business owner if you have a peer group of business owners. I did not realize how hard it could be to grow a business just with my head in the sand, focused on that. So, power of peer groups. One thing which I thought would be harder that actually turned out to be easier is that bringing on the right people for me. And I tell a great story in the book about how I was in a town in Northern California about to open a fitness club, and out of nowhere someone grabbed my arm, and that relationship ended up being someone who ran that club for me for the better part of 12 years. Is how you don't always have to go out looking for the best people. Oftentimes, the best people, if you just keep your eyes open and look around, will come into my orbit, especially if I am all in, radiant, positive, and energetic. I've found that the people I want to surround myself with tend to gravitate towards me. So I've learned that it's actually easy to attract the right team as long as I'm all into the situation. So that's something I found to be easier over the years that I thought was going to be a lot harder. I thought I'd always have to go out there and look and do the external work, but I've really found that doing the internal work helps drive
Mhm.
the right people to come to me.
What's something that very few people agree with you on?
What's something that very few people agree with me on? I would say that I can't say it's something that very few people necessarily agree with me on, but it's something that's, I think, certainly unique to me, is that the best way to de-risk something is to go all into it. I think a bigger risk is being an inch deep, a mile wide across 12 different endeavors, right? I think that actually leads to a higher chance of failure than if you just focus on a single one and go in. And I'm not talking about with portfolio management. Okay, it's financing or financial planning. It's great to diversify. When it comes to entrepreneurial business ownership, to start with, go all in. Be focused on the one thing you're doing. Don't try to have your hands in too many fires. And it goes that way operationally as well. Find the metric that matters and mercilessly focus on that. Don't try to focus on a lot of different things. You can do six things mediocre or do one thing really well. Focus
Good
on
advice.
that one thing. So
That's great advice, actually. I ask all my guests the same three questions. I call them the core three. So, other than your book, please share a book or resource that's had a significant impact on you.
So I believe in the power of repetition. Shawshank Redemption, I think, is a fantastic both book written by Stephen King, which not a lot of people know, and the movie as well. For those that have seen it, this will resonate, but it has three key life lessons to it. One, life is unfair. Okay. Second, think long term. Third, at the end of the day, if you follow your heart, things will work out. And I think that movie, for so many different reasons, encapsulates that. So I highly recommend reading the book by Stephen King and then watching the movie. For those like you that haven't watched it yet, I'm just super excited for you because I think it's going to level up your life at least just a little bit. So
Oh my
super stoked
gosh.
about that.
Well, I used to be a big Stephen King fan, so I did not know that he wrote that. I read in the 80s, when he was really I don't know if you remember, but I think I'm a little older than you. In the 80s, yeah, late 80s, he came out with it, and there were a whole bunch of other books, Gerald's. I forget them all, but I read them all every time they came out. So, yeah, I was a big Stephen King fan, but I did not know about Shawshank Redemption. What is one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic? I know it's a loaded question.
Well, I thought you did a very good job being thorough and going through everything. The only last thing I'd mention that we could have talked about is, which builds off assessment. Just begin with the end in mind with this whole
Mm,
process. Like, understand
I
what it is you
remember
want to.
reading that. I
Yeah,
remember reading that, begin with the end in mind.
yeah. Understand what it is you want to get out of this endeavor, and then you can simply back solve it from there.
That's a great point. Excellent advice. And as we close, I ask all of my guests this: what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Yeah, my recommendation is spend the 99 cents and the 3 hours and buy and read the book, available at grititdone.com through the end of at least through the end of May at 99 cents. And if you're thinking about going through and being an entrepreneurial business owner, or buying a business or going down that route, most time efficient, cost effective first step in the process. And it's literally like everything that I know. And it's a book that, of course, I wish I'd had 16 years ago when I went down this route. So, cool thing, I think, for everyone to read, and also for, to share with like friends and family and other people and things like that. Bottom line, to be a better American is to be an entrepreneurial business owner. And I think that this book will help shed light on why I feel that way, in a way that's just going to be healthy for anyone to delve into.
And I enjoyed reading it, as I said. Reed, thank you. Thank you for the gift of your time. How can people reach out to you and find you?
Yeah, I'm active on LinkedIn and getting more active on X as well. So you can follow me there. And then ultimately, grititdone.com. It's where you can buy the book, available on May 13th, 99 cents to the end of May.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, Reed, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me, and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, check out my website, personalcoachfinder.com, and find someone who can help. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps today and make your life awesome, friends.